people won't have a clue who you are. And I
Yeah.
will. I've actually got my phone on your book, which is terrible. So I will show everyone your book as well, so
Okay.
that people who want to know more will know where to go.
Great.
So yeah, fire away. What do we need to know about Dennis Sherwood?
I'm Dennis Sherwood. And a long time ago now, in 2013, Ofqual, the exam regulator, commissioned me to do a consulting assignment to study and document the various systems within which they operated. And I did quite a lot of work there. And I looked at, for example, grade inflation. I looked at the impact of performance measures on teachers. I looked at the nature of the so-called competitive environment in which AQA, OCR rather, and Pearson EdXL compete for exams. And I also looked at the systems for marking, assessment and grading. And doing all of that work, I came across a number of really interesting things. And let me right away put a stake in the ground, which is about the difference between marking a script and assigning the grade. Because when a student, finishes the exam and the sweat is pouring off their brow, the exam paper disappears into space and gets split up each question, sent to an examiner who then assigns a mark to each question. Those individual marks are then aggregated by the exam board to a total score, 66, whatever it might be. Much, much later than that, that mark 66 is mapped onto a grade scale. So there's a distinction between the human activity of reading an answer and assigning a mark on the one hand, and then the policy which says mark 66 equals grade B. And everything I'm talking about is about grading that last bit. Examiners do a really good job. This is about Ofqual's policy for how that grade on your certificate, and it's the grade that counts, is determined from that mark 66, which is deeply, deeply flawed. And to a certain extent, being an outsider and spotting that is a benefit, because Emperor's New Clothes and all of those metaphors, because I was not stuck in the middle of the system, maybe I was able to notice something other people might have noticed but not paid much attention to.
Yeah, I'm going to be intrigued by that because I have a similar motivation actually. I see myself very much as an outsider because I'm an immigrant. I was an illegal immigrant. I grew up in Spain, traveled around a lot, and so I've ended up naturally, just through my experience, having an outsider's perspective. And I agree. I think that helps. You've said in your book and in your blogs that 1 in 4 grades is wrong. So, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. Okay. What I mean by this is something, very, very specific, and it sounds a bit nerdy, but it really is crucially important. Let us say, Alex is there that day in August. Alex opens the envelope. Alex sees, let's say, biology grade A, thinks fantastic. Sees physics grade A, thinks even more fantastic because physics is really tough. And then sees chemistry grade B, 2 A's and a B. Now, 2 A's and a B is pretty damn good at A level, particularly in science subjects. But Alex wants to be a doctor, and the offer is 3 A's. So 2 A's and a B means that Alex does not become a doctor. Now, how does Alex know that that grade B is the right grade? The fact of the matter is that Alex doesn't know, nor does any candidate, nor does any teacher. You're just told the grade 6 GCSE English, grade 3 GCSE Maths. You're told the grade and you have to take it on trust. Is the system trustworthy? How do you know? Now, you might say, okay, let's appeal the grade. Well, there's something very important about the current system for challenges and appeals. If Alex were to appeal that grade B, Alex does not get the script remarked from scratch by a second senior examiner. Every student knows that a different teacher marking exactly the same exam might give a slightly different mark for that English essay. Now, the exam boards know that because they build in what's called tolerance. And tolerance means that when an examiner marks that essay, say 14 out of 20, there's a senior examiner's mark, which might be 15 out of 20. And tolerance is the number of marks either side of that standard mark, the senior examiner's mark, which is okay. Now, supposing that tolerance is 2 marks on that question, senior examiner's mark is 15, 14 is regarded as a legitimate mark for that question, and the 14 goes through. When all the marks are added to give the script's total mark, the impact of that 14 might be that the mark for the total script is, say, 65. Had the senior examiner marked that script, the total might have been 66. So both 65 and 66 are okay. There are no marking errors. But way, way later than all of this, the grade boundary is drawn. And if the grade boundary is up to 65 grade B, 66 and above grade A, then the grade on the certificate is a B or an A, depending on the accident of whether I got that 14 or that 15. Now, which mark is given and which grade is on the certificate is a lottery. Now, if what I've described was rare and happened once in a blue moon in scripts, it wouldn't be much of a problem. So the big question is, in a population of 6 million GCSE, AS and A-level scripts every year, how often do you get this situation? Well, Ofqual actually answered that question in a huge research project they carried out, would you believe, in 2014 and 2015. And in those reports, when you look at the answers, it turns out that on average, across all 6 million scripts, about 1 script in every 4 suffers from the problem that the grade would have been different if a senior examiner had marked the script. And it varies hugely by subject. But actually, if you look at Ofqual's own research, in 2018, they published all the evidence that on average, across 6 million scripts, 1.5 million of those would have a different grade had a senior examiner marked it.
I've read those as well. You've kindly sent me the links. And I just want to test my understanding then with your more expert view. So if I think about English and English literature was the least accurately marked, I believe.
Graded, not marked.
Okay, yeah, good distinction. The least accurately graded. And that was roughly 50% accuracy.
I prefer reliability. Reliability means, can I trust it, and would a second opinion verify that? A-level combined English language and literature is the one you're thinking of. It's an A-level subject only, as you know. And that clocks in the number that Ofqual actually, the number that Ofqual give is actually 52%, but actually the other half, 48% specifically, but that's pretty well half, have got a grade which is different from that. So if you do combined English and Lit and you've got grade B on your certificate, there's about a 50% chance that that's the grade you truly merit. But there's a 50% probability that it isn't. So what else might it be? So there's about a 25% chance you should have got an A, but there's a 25% chance you should have got a C, which is bad. But even worse, you cannot find out. If you challenge that grade, if there is a review of marking, it will confirm the original grade B because it's within tolerance. So if you think of all the kids doing combined English and Lit, for every 100, 52 with the right grade, 48 with the wrong grade, 24 wrong up, 24 wrong down, and you can never discover which grade is right. Before 2016, you could have a remark when you challenged. After 2016, Ofqual stopped that from happening. So you cannot discover these wrong grades.
So my reading of that was you would get remarked, but as long as you weren't more than a grade out, your grade wouldn't change. Have I got that completely wrong?
Now, you're absolutely right, Dominic. This is not clear at all. If you look at the websites of the exam boards, AQA, OCR, and Pearson, it does not say your script is not remarked. It does say you have a review of marking which checks for marking errors. And you have to be something of a nerd to recognize that checking for marking errors is not the same as having a remark by a senior examiner.
I want to just try and put this into human terms to see if my student viewers will appreciate what's going on here. So let's imagine I'm a senior examiner. I work for AQA and we're looking at a GCSE English paper. And AQA says we'll have a tolerance of 10%. So in a 40-mark question, I, as the senior examiner, might say, look, this is worth 36 marks. And then other examiners will go off and mark the scripts, and AQA will say, well, you can disagree 10% either way from the senior examiner. So we'll accept a mark of 40 and we'll also accept a mark of 32. So there's this huge range of marks that are tolerable, yeah? So let's say I don't get the grade that I want and I appeal. AQA then say, well, is that mark between 32 and 40? If it is, we're fine with it. If, however, we think it should have been below 32, then we'll give it a different grade. Is that the right sort of chronology we're looking at?
That's absolutely right. It's only when it's beyond tolerance either way do you get the script remarked. And as a consequence of that remark, that may or may not result in a regrade. So the identification of a marking error does not necessarily imply that the grade changes, because it depends on where the grade boundaries are.
I'm guessing then that the logic of this is, unless my grade is 2 grades out from what I'm expecting, an appeal is largely going to be useless, because if I'm only 1 grade out, it's going to be within tolerance.
You just don't know. And, grades can change by 2 grades or more sometimes, because this fuzziness of which we speak for subjects like history, English lit, and so on, often straddles 2 or 3 grade boundaries.
Yeah. And what we're saying is it's happening probably to nearly 1 in 2 scripts in English.
In fact, Ofqual's report of 2018, figure 12 there, gives the numbers for 14 subjects. So, as you might expect, the most reliable grades are for maths of the various different flavours. So maths is at the top, and then you've got physics and chemistry and biology, and then you've got the humanities, geography and so on. Geography kicks in at about 65% right, 35% wrong. English language kicks in at about 60-40. History kicks in at about 56-44. And the worst one that was published of the 14 subjects is the combined English language and literature. If you dig deeper and look at what happens for the mark within the script, the most startling finding is that for every subject, including maths, for every level, GCSE, AS and A, for every script marked right on a grade boundary, it's 50-50. So if you're on a grade boundary, you've got a 50-50 chance of getting the right grade on the right side of the grade boundary, or the wrong one on the long one, or the wrong grade on the wrong side of the boundary, even in maths.
But what's your solution to a problem which seems to me intractable, because Ofqual police the system and they're not interested in changing it? They're quite happy with this level of unreliability, aren't they? So what on earth can a student do?
Let's start with Ofqual. Ofqual have known about this since 2016 and are very, very reluctant to do anything about it. And of course, the exam boards have known about it since then as well. and they've done nothing about it. And actually, it's because people have done nothing about it that I've been kicking up. That's why I wrote the book and why I write the blogs and why we're having this conversation, because I think that this is terribly, terribly damaging. And Ofqual have had every opportunity to fix this problem since 2015, but have deliberately chosen not to do so. So we need to put pressure on Ofqual, pressure on the government to actually fix this. Because the people who are the victims of this are the students. The students get those wrong grades. They don't know they've got the wrong grades. They can never find out, and they're stuck with them forever. The resits for GCSE, English and Maths are now. Those resits occur because young people were awarded, so to speak, grade 3 in GCSE English or GCSE Maths and are obliged to resit. If we go back to August the 24th, this year, about 30,000 young people were awarded GCSE English grade 3 in error when they should have got a grade 4. So 30,000 young people have been forced to resit GCSE English, have had their progression interrupted, have had goodness knows what damage done to their self-confidence and mental health, not because they don't know their grammar, not because they didn't read whatever they had to read, but simply because Ofqual can't deliver reliable grades. Those 30,000 young people don't know who they are. Their teachers don't know who they are. They can never find out. But there's 30,000 of them out there from this summer's exams. And this has been happening year on year on year. I really believe you should know about this problem, and you should talk to your parents, you should talk to your teachers in particular, and say to the teachers, you have power. You are part of the National Education Union, ASCL, whatever it might be. Surely you must be upset by this. You should put pressure on Ofqual to fix this, because only public pressure can bring this to bear. The Commons Education Select Committee has asked questions about this over the last several years, and most recently, a House of Lords committee has asked questions of people like Nick Gibb about this, but they still don't get proper answers. And Ofqual actually, in collusion, and I say collusion with the exam boards, who also have got power to fix this, do nothing. So students, you can't do anything by yourself, but collectively, you can, through your parents, through your schools, actually say, this is unfair to me. Please do something about it. And if we have a strong voice, just as many other lobby groups have a strong voice, something will happen, particularly if there is a change of government in the next 12 months.
Okay, so I could write to ASCL, because that's my union. Presumably I could write to my MP, although I've never got anywhere by doing that, but I could do that. My solutions are more immediate, because it's going to take time for that to change if that actually does succeed. And so what I tell my students is, if you aim for the top grades, it's much harder for the examiners to give you rogue marks within the tolerance. And the reason I say that is because of the bell curve that marks are placed on. And when I look at exam answers, it's very clear that there's a complete step change in effort in English between someone who's going to get a grade 7 and someone who's going to get a grade 8. Now, I haven't got a big enough sample to say whether this holds true at a national level, but it seems to me that if you put in the effort to get a grade 8, it's far harder to get a mark that differs wildly from a senior examiner, compared to if you put in the effort that would get you a grade 5. Well, that's going to look a lot like the effort at grade 6 and grade 4, and so you're much more likely to get that disparity in a mark. So yeah, my solution is, hey guys, watch my channel. I'll show you how to get high grades with high effort, and you'll be in some ways insulated against this unreliability. Is that a logical approach, or am I overly optimistic?
Dominic, it's wonderful for me to hear that, and I really, really value what you say, and that reflects the fact that I don't have the experience that you have as a teacher. So I don't interact with young people as you do, and kind of practical advice for how a young person can set a high aspiration and therefore, beat the odds, if you like, is really, really wonderful and stirring advice. And that's very, very lovely for me to hear. So thank you for putting that one on the table. And I do hope that everyone listening to this, and all the people that you interact with, and all the people who watch your fantastic website materials will take that on board. Obviously, you're 100% right. The higher you aspire, the harder that you work and the diligence you show, the further you will be up the grade scale and the better your results will be. So that's a wonderful and pragmatic thing to say. Thank you.
Well, that was very generous of you. You're very welcome. We haven't touched on this before, but I've got an equally big problem with the way grades are tied to a bell curve. So the analogy I use is, if you go out and take a driving test tomorrow, it's pass or fail based on the criteria of the exam. And if every single person who took the test tomorrow passed, you would still pass. And if everyone still failed, you could still pass. But the exam system we've got in this country says, actually, there is no pass mark. There is no mark for any grade. We don't actually care what you know and don't know. We'll just apply you to a bell curve and say, the top 20% are going to get a grade 7 and above, and the bottom 25% are going to get a grade 3 and below. Irrespective of the marks that they score, we simply don't care what students know and don't know. So that drives me crazy. Is that a problem that you see as well with the system?
The system is fraught with problems. And you touch on one which drives me bonkers, especially in English, where you've got the forgotten third, because isn't 25% who get grade 3 and below, it's closer to 33%. What staggers me is this. We have young people who go to school from age 5 or whatever, they sit GCSE 11 years later. How can the education system build in the guarantee that an infant born in my local hospital today, if there are 3 of them, one of them is going to fail GCSE English in 16 years' time after 11 years of schooling? I don't get it. How can an education system guarantee failure for 1/3 of the students after 11 years of school? It's absolutely nuts. So there's something deeply wrong in the application of that bell curve. And then that takes us into the curriculum and all of that stuff. And should there be exams at age 16? The whole thing really needs reform. And there are many, many people arguing for reform right now. And this business about unreliable grades is just a teeny bit of that, but it's the one which is the easiest to fix, to get right, and can be done now. But that bell curve of which you speak just is crazy. How can that make any sense at all? I don't get it.
Well, I'm with you 100%, and I've never heard a reasonable explanation of it. It is mystifying. I don't understand why we've settled on it as a country. Now, I know you've got a kind of grade distribution solution to the A-level grades. Would you like to try and explain that?
What you do is you print on every certificate these words: Ofqual warning, the grades on this certificate are reliable to one grade either way. Now, that says that if you've got a grade B for whatever it is at A-level or a grade 6 or whatever it is at GCSE, don't read that grade 6 as the grade, but say it might be a 5, it might be a 6, or it might be a 7, and judge me accordingly. Yes, I am different from a grade 9 and not quite as good. That's probably true, but I'm not a grade 3 either. And at A-level, particularly when universities are making these decisions based on grades, it's really important they don't have these hard-edged grade boundaries. Now, those words, grades are reliable to one grade either way, is another version of saying one grade in 4 is wrong. They're equivalent. It's easy to demonstrate that. But those words, grades are reliable to one grade either way, are important because they weren't said by me. I mentioned the Commons Education Select Committee, the body that looks after education policy across England and that holds the Minister of Education to account, ostensibly. On the 2nd of September 2020, after the algorithm fiasco of that year, there was a meeting at which then chief regulator, the chief executive, the boss of Ofqual, was a lady called Dame Glenys Stacey. Dame Glenys Stacey is a very, very trustworthy and honourable lady, and it was she who commissioned that big research project in 2013, 2014, 2015, when they measured all this stuff. She was asked a question about this, and she said, well, we all know that grades are reliable to one grade either way, which is the same as one grade in 4 is wrong in principle. So having that on the certificate would do an enormous amount of good because it means people don't make these cliff edge grade boundaries. That's one solution that could be implemented literally overnight. There are many other solutions as well. Another one I quite like is instead of saying 56 or 66 or whatever is grade B, you say for English, the mark you got was 66, but it might have been any number between 62 and 70. So don't judge me on the 66. Think of me as if I deserved 70, which I could well have done much, much better. And that's more reliable because if you had a remark, that would confirm a number in that range. But Ofqual can't find it in their minds, let alone hearts, to do this because they are defending the status quo.
Yeah, I think you sent me the link to that House of Commons committee, and they were happy with 98% accuracy, one grade either way. And it's like we're only inaccurate or unreliable 2%, and that seems like a really high standard. Whereas to me, it seems like a ridiculously low standard.
Dominic, you've read all the stuff very well. You're absolutely right. There was at that House of Commons Select Committee, another of Ofqual's senior people made the actually rather more precise statement that 98% of A-level grades and 96% of GCSE grades are accurate or reliable. Her word was accurate, in fact, to one grade either way, which means 2% of A-level grades are 2 or more adrift, and 4% of GCSE grades are 2 or more grades adrift. I think that's terrible too, but I don't think that the Commons Select Committee were happy with that. I think the House of Commons Select Committee were putting pressure on Ofqual to fix it, but Ofqual still haven't done so. And I think that says a lot about the relative power of select committees and ministers who actually stick their heels in and won't be moved. And of course, we see that in many other select committees holding ministers to account, or ministers getting away with all sorts of things that really are wrong. And education is just one of those examples.
Gosh, that's depressing. But I completely agree with you. I must admit, I look at the educational landscape and I see it the same way. And for me, it's like an absurdist comedy where the rules are clearly absurd, but there doesn't seem to be an easy way to change them because everyone accepts the absurdity. I find it, rather than a cause of despair, Which it is really. If I think about, students applying for for university with incorrect, unreliable grades, that is potentially awful. If I could introduce an element of hope, my experience of students going to a university and my own children going to university is actually the experience that you buy into when you go matters much more than the subject you take and the grades you had at A-level. So if I'm going to take a cynical view, I'm making these figures up, but I can check them later. I think we're now at the stage where over 30% of graduates get a first. In other words, your A-level grades really aren't going to affect your future outcome as much as we like to think they do. And therefore, if you just develop really great work habits and go to a university that fits your personality, your life is going to turn out great, even if you could have gone to a better university with better grades. But again, am I being overly optimistic about life?
I think there's a lot of truth, Dominic, in what you say. And, once again, I really admire the optimism and the spirit there. And I think, by and large, what you say is true. And certainly A-level grades have no significance whatsoever, beyond, age, 20 or whatever it might be. And certainly, whatever you progress to beyond age 18, 95% is up to your own endeavours and your own spirit in making a success of it. To me, the problem is, firstly, an intrinsic unfairness in the fact that unreliable grades cannot be fixed and exist in the first place. That does intrinsic damage to self-confidence. The other thing is that the way high-stakes exams actually operate right now is they do close doors. So, for example, if you take students who want to study medicine, but, young kids at age 16, 17 are highly motivated to do that. And they know that they need 3 A's, say, chemistry, physics, biology to get in. And it's a life calling. Now, here's a number that you all, I think, find surprising, because I'm talking about chemistry, physics, and biology. 3 A's. Now, it turns out that if you do the arithmetic, about 1 in every 6 candidates who have a certificate showing AAA, chemistry, physics, biology, about 1 in every 6 merited at least 1 grade B. If those 1 in 6 students actually take that medical place, firstly, they're underqualified and they might struggle, they might drop out. And we saw a lot of people struggling with universities and dropping out with the result of, what happened in 2020 grades. But at the same time, they have denied a place to a student who had at least 1 B and no C's, who actually merited AAA. Now, no one knows who those students are that were denied a place, but they're not going to get in through clearing because that's medicine. So they've been denied that life chance of becoming a doctor simply because they got the wrong grade. Now, they'll be successful in what else they do, and they may become a doctor through other routes. But at age 18, that's catastrophic. And that's just one example. And I come back to GCSE grade 3 English. If you get grade 3 English and forced to resit, it must be devastating to many, many students. Some maybe say, I don't care, but many of them do. And as I said, 30,000 students suffered that problem this summer. And that's just got to be wrong. But your overall statements of have high aspirations, work hard, push the doors open as you can has got to be right. But someone out there too is slamming the doors as well.
Yes. Okay, so let's imagine I want to know more about this. How can I find your blog? How can I reach you? And is there anything else that we need to know?
Yeah, well, thanks for those open-ended questions. Yeah, my name is Dennis Sherwood. And if you Google Dennis Sherwood exam grades, you probably come up with quite a few hits, because I've written a lot about this on all the major platforms, Schools Week, Times Education Supplement, many others as well. There's the book that I wrote, which was published in August 2022. That's last year, just before the exam results are out, called Missing the Mark. And that's available, in both in a Kindle type edition as well as in print, and that's available on Amazon. And indeed, I talk to a lot of people about this, particularly students and parents, about what's going on and the appeal system and so on. And my email is Dennis, 2 N's, at silverbulletmachine.com, Dennis@silverbulletmachine.com. And although I'm not directly involved, I really am an evangelist about trying to get this problem fixed, because the more people that know about it, the more people that know that you can't appeal against these wrong grades and the injustice that engenders, then the greater the public pressure on Ofqual and the authorities to fix it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for an incredibly well-informed discussion. Hopefully my viewers will find it super useful, as I have, and gosh, it would be great if it could change.
Yeah, and it can change because things do change. And I think really, if I might say my thanks to you, Dominic, for your great questions, a really lively, spontaneous conversation. But in particular, if I might appeal to teachers who are watching this. Teachers, you're the most important community, because, the student is damaged, but the student comes and goes. Teachers, you're there for the long term. And you care about your kids. You want them to do as well as they can, and you devote your lives to helping them do that. So what a kick in the teeth if you're an English teacher, that whatever you do, whatever they do, nearly half of them end up with the wrong grade. You can't live with that. So teachers, make a fuss. The NEU in particular know all about this. They have an assessment team who are working on this, and I have briefed them and they have listened. And indeed, Robin Bevan, the former president of the NEU in 2020-21, wrote the preface to the book. So if you're a member of the NEU, please speak to them. If you're a member of Sixth Form Colleges Association, ASCL, NAHT, HMC, whatever, please talk about it and use those vehicles, because they can put real pressure on the exam boards and Ofqual to bring about change. You have got the power if you wish to exert it. Thank you.
That was brilliant. I've been doing some training for head teachers, and I'm struck by how often this happens. When we get to the end of a presentation, you often get the most valuable nugget. And so for me, that hold on, the whole world is upside down, but actually your best bet for getting it changed is the NEU, and they're already on board and they're already aware. That's fantastic news, because that's empowering, isn't it? There's a sliver of hope.
And if you're a member of the NEU, September, October 2023, Educate, I have got the final word comment in the Educate magazine by the NEU.
Okay, well, fingers crossed, Dennis, that we get somewhere, however long it takes.